monkeys do? Let me see. They go. All right, let me see what they do a monkey. Come on, let me see you do a monkey. Good. No, you don't want to do a monkey? So monkeys are a lot of fun, and we're going to be looking at Curious George today. And I'm going to read you guys a little bit of it, and then we'll go into the narration. So here you can see, you can kind of get a little idea on maybe what's going to happen, right? Like looking at some of the pictures. What does this picture kind of tell you?
It's not. It's
Right.
the hospital bed.
Yeah, it's not good, right? Not good. So it kind of, you kind of get an idea from the illustration, right? So you can look at the picture and sometimes draw an idea on what may happen in the book, right? And let's see. Let's get rolling. Let's see what happens here. There we go. So Curious George goes to the hospital. This is George. He lived with his friends. The man with the yellow hat. He was a good little monkey, but he was always curious. Today, George was curious about the big box on the man's desk. Uh-oh. George and his curiousness. What happens when George gets curious? He gets into trouble. That's right. So what could be in it? George wondered. Maybe it was candy. Maybe he could eat it. George put the piece in his mouth. Uh-oh. That doesn't sound good. And before he knew it, what happened? He had swallowed it. Uh-oh. Not good. And to George, this piece of the puzzle, what did it look like to him?
Candy.
It looked like a piece of candy. So he swallowed it. And what's starting to happen? Poor George is starting to get in a bellyache.
Maybe he could eat it. George could.
Nobody here would eat a piece of candy, would they? Would you eat a piece of, what, would you eat a puzzle piece? No, I don't think so. So, a while later, the man with the yellow hat came home. He said, why, George? I see you have already opened the box with the jigsaw puzzle. It was supposed to be a surprise for you. Well, let's go work on it. Finally, the puzzle was finished. Well, it was almost finished. What happened? So it was missing how many pieces? One piece. And let's see where that piece is and what happens. Okay. The man looked for it everywhere, but he could not find it. Well, it cannot be helped. Maybe we'll find it in the morning. Let's go to bed now, George. The next morning, George did not feel well. Poor George. George had a tummy ache, and he did not want to eat his breakfast. We don't like tummy aches, we didn't want to eat our breakfast, right? And what happens when we don't want to eat our breakfast? We just want to what? Right. The man was worried. He went to the telephone and called Dr. Baker. Dr. Baker said, I'll be right over as soon as I can. Turn the page. So first Dr. Baker, he looked at George. He looked at his throat and he felt his tummy. And then he looked at his stethoscope and he listened to his heart. And what did he hear? When he heard this, when you hear the heartbeat, what do you hear? Do-do, 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 do-do. Well, let me hear everybody. Do-do, do-do, do-do. Okay. I'm not sure what's wrong, the doctor said. You better take George to the hospital and have an x-ray of him. Do we all know what an x-ray is?
Yes.
You guys had gone probably at the dentist? No. They take a picture, sometimes they take a picture of your teeth. So you've had one at the dentist? Yeah, one. A lot of times they take them at the dentist because they want to see how everything looks. I'll call them and let them know you're coming. So the doctor's going to call the hospital, okay? Don't worry, George. I guess George wasn't feeling so good about this going to the hospital idea. But the man with the yellow hat said, don't worry, George. When they were driving to the hospital. You've been there before. When you broke your leg. So he's very curious. He gets himself into a lot of different things. They must know him well at the hospital. Remember how nice the doctors and nurses were? George held his big rubber ball tight as they walked up the hospital steps. Poor George. Poor George. A nurse took them downstairs and they went walking, right? They were walking down a long hallway. And they gave George something to drink that looked like white and tasted very sweet. It's called barium. The nurse explained it helps doctors find out what is wrong with you. Okay, so George drank this sweet drink called barium. It went into his body. And then they took him to the next room and George stood and he laid on the table and the doctor began putting on a heavy apron, right? They put on these heavy aprons here. Okay. Then he gave the man one just like it. George was curious. Would he get one too? What do you guys think?
No.
Huh? He did. You get on the table, George, the doctor said. I'm going to take some extra pictures of your insides. He pushed a button and there was a funny noise. There. Now you may get up. And we'll have the x-rays developed right away. Now let's see. There's something that's there that should not be, the doctor said when they were looking at the x-rays. Why? Look at that. I think, what do you guys think? What is it? Puzzle piece, exactly. I think it may be the piece that was missing in your jigsaw puzzle yesterday, said the man. Well, 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 said the doctor. At least now we know what's wrong with our little patient. I'll tell Dr. Baker right away. George will have to stay at the hospital for a few days. They'll put a tube down his throat to get the piece out. It's only a small operation. Not a big deal. I'll call the nurse to have her take you to the admitting office.
How can you swallow
I don't know. George gets into everything. He's kind of like anybody here have a dog?
Yes.
Okay. I have a dog and my dog gets into everything. She eats everything. She swallows everything. Okay, so you must know. They get into everything. Okay. And when you have a dog, they just eat everything. Many people were waiting outside the office. George had to wait too. Look, Betsy. Who'd she see, Betsy? The woman next to him said to her little girl, "There's Curious George." There was Curious George in the waiting room waiting to be called in by the doctors and nurses. "Betsy, look up for a moment," she said. Did not even smile. Betsy had never been to a hospital before. And what do you think was wrong with Betsy? What was wrong with Betsy that was also wrong with George? Because she'd never been to the hospital before.
Scared?
She was scared, right? She was scared. How's everybody doing at home? Is everybody okay at home?
Yeah.
Can we all hear at home
Yeah,
too?
we just admitted to.
Okay. Finally, it was George's turn. A pretty young nurse took him to the next room.
Mr. Shia.
Yes.
We have a I have a guest in the library. He's reading today. Okay, that's why the voice is different.
Do you guys have a question at home?
Can
Go ahead.
Story from the beginning.
Oh, you know what? We have the film version of
Yes.
it, and we're going to start it soon. Would you
Very
like to
soon.
see that?
So just hang tight a minute, okay? And you'll get to see the film. So there were lots of children in the hospital after that pretty nurse took George back, right? They decided to give George a bed, and there were doctors and nurses all around.
Uh-oh.
Dave was having a blood
We'll
transfusion.
probably have to start the film in 2 minutes.
Steve had his leg bandaged and was sitting in a go-kart. Betsy was in bed looking sad. George got the bed next to Betsy. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put it on automatic reader for a minute, just to kind of speed it up a little, and then we will get into the movie.
George was glad when he was in his bed at last. His tummy was hurting again. The man sat with him for a while. "Now I have to leave you, George," he finally said. "I'll be back first thing in the morning before they take you to the operating room. Nurse Carol will tuck you in when it's time to sleep." Then he left. George just sat there and cried. As he had promised, the man was back early next morning. The nurses were keeping George very busy. One nurse was taking his temperature. One was taking his blood pressure. One was giving him a pill to make you sleepy, George, she said. And one was getting ready to give him a shot.
Oh.
"It's going to hurt, George," she said, "but only for a moment." She took his arm, and George let out a scream. "The needle hasn't touched you yet," said the nurse, laughing. "There, now it's fine. That wasn't so
Why
bad,
did you
was
want a shot?
it?" "No, it
I'm
wasn't.
in love. I can
And
marry
anyway,
him.
it was over now."
We should
By the time the attendant came with the stretcher to wheel him to the operating room, George was getting sleepy.
Was
He tried.
it? Try the team real fast.